Let me ask you a controversial question. Should you become a Christian apologist? I've been saying certain things about this area for a number of years, and recently a friend of mine, Doug Beaumont, has been saying some of the same things, some of the same perspectives on this, and so I thought I would throw in my 2 cents as well. So we're going to look at that question. Should you become a Christian apologist? Should you study Christian apologetics? Why or why not? We're going to say there are some reasons why you should study it or become a Christian apologist, and some reasons why you should not. So what are those reasons? Well, first of all, what is apologetics? Apologetics in general is a defense of something. Well, so Christian apologetics is a defense of the Christian faith. You could be an economic apologist for capitalism or communism. You could be an apologist for the existence of UFOs and aliens, whatever you want. But if you're defending something, then you are doing a type of apologetics, okay? So I got into apologetics back around 2004 because I had my own questions about Christianity, not so much about whether or not it was true. I thought it was true, but I wanted to know why I thought it was true. I really couldn't defend it. I couldn't give you good examples or reasons for that. The apologetics ask questions about, like, does God exist? Is the Bible reliable? Why does God allow so much evil if he does exist? All sorts of questions, right? So some of the new stuff I've gotten into over the years will be ufology. Yes, you heard that right. Study of UFOs and aliens. And I was watching shows like the Unidentified show on History Channel, where a Christian says he saw a UFO and it was a real faith shaker. Well, why would that be a faith shaker? Well, that can be actually a part of apologetics. And that's kind of what I do on this channel and my other channel, shameless plug, the Mysterian Files. So this has become, apologetics has become a fast growing area in the last 20 or so years. When I started looking at apologetics, I was from Charlotte, North Carolina, and there were 2 schools that I could find. I did the famous, what everyone said they did a Google search for MA in apologetics, a master's degree in apologetics. There was Biola out in Los Angeles, the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, and then there was Southern Evangelical Seminary, which is in my backyard, and I had no idea. And I already had some books by Norm Geisler, at least one that was When Skeptics Ask. And so I wanted to learn apologetics. And so when I graduated from Lee University in Tennessee, I went to Charlotte to study apologetics. And I ended up doing more than that because I realized in that first semester you have to do philosophy if you're going to do any good at apologetics, or if you're going to do if you're going to be, really know what you're doing with apologetics or theology in general or anything like that. So I added philosophy, then I added biblical studies because I wanted to be able to read the Bible in its original languages, and ended up just going haywire on all these degrees and classes. So studying apologetics there, and over the years, my views changed a little bit, and they're going to be kind of the same views that I think pretty much the same views that my friend Doug Beaumont talks about. And that is that I discovered that Christian apologetics is not really its own discipline. All right. So I remember emailing Gary Habermas one day and I said, I'm interested in historical apologetics. Where do you recommend I should go and what should I do? And he said, you should go get a PhD in history, because as Doug says on his channel, and the link to that's in the description, by the way, is if you're going to be a successful apologist, you need to be a scholar in that area or some kind of an expert in the area you want to learn. Now, there are reasons for doing general apologetics, and we're going to discuss that as we go along. But Doug raises some questions or concerns that I've had over the years, and he raises 3 in particular. Number one, he says that if you're going to do apologetics, and he seems to indicate or mean in his video that when he says apologetics, he means for a job, especially in academia or maybe in a church setting. Should you do it? Well, what I've been saying for a number of years, and I've gone back and forth with other apologists like Rob Bowman on my blog, and Rob's a great guy. He's been at our conferences like Rob a lot. We have a little bit different view on this. And so what I've been saying and what Doug is saying here is that a Christian apologetics is not a discipline in and of itself. Rather, it is a practice. So you're going to take history, philosophy, theology, Bible, science, whatever, and you're going to apply that in the defense of the faith. And when Cordwin said this years ago, somewhere, I think it was on social media, or maybe I heard him say it at a conference, and I remember him saying it somewhere, and me going, yeah, that's my view too. So So apologetics really isn't a discipline. It's kind of become a quasi-discipline to some people because you go and you can get a master's degree in it, or maybe even a BA. You certainly can get a PhD in it now. In fact, SES used to offer a PhD in apologetics. And then as soon as it got started, Doug and Richard Howe and Tom Howe, Tom and Richard were the professors and Doug was one of the first students, realized, we probably should make this more of a normal academic degree. And so they changed it to philosophy of religion. So the first question or again, concern that Doug brought up is that when you're looking for doing professional apologetics, there are inadequate degrees. So he says that apologetics isn't a subject, and I would agree with that. Not a subject. It's not a singular discipline like you go and get a degree in biology or history or something like that. And even those degrees have subdisciplines. And you've got biology, you've got sub areas in biology, sub areas in history, sub areas and then whatever. Philosophy, you don't just do philosophy. You can get a general degree in philosophy, or you can do philosophy of mind, philosophy of religion, but there are subdisciplines in those. So, but people today tend to treat apologetics as if it's its own discipline. Say, well, I'm an apologist, or I have a degree in apologetics. And so Doug and I's concern with that is that you're basically as the saying goes, you are a jack of all trades, a master of none. Well, as we're going to see later on, I'm going to say, and Doug, I think, agrees, that's okay in certain contexts, depending on what you want to do. Okay. But we both think that getting a PhD in apologetics is probably not the best idea because it doesn't really set you up for academics, because academics you're going to be teaching in a certain discipline, a certain academic discipline. And all my years of looking before I was settled in at SAS and full-time and everything, I looked at a lot of job applications and openings, and I only saw one that said apologetics. And so normally they're going to say we want a Bible guy or a theology guy or a philosophy guy. Apologetics is really broad because it could be anything. This is why I think it's not a discipline. Because as an apologist, you can be an historian like Gary Habermas, you can be a philosopher like Bill Craig or Norman Geisler, you can be a theologian, you can be a scientist like Fuzz Rana or Hugh Ross, those kind of guys, and they're all doing apologetics. Well, you can't, all that can't be in one discipline. You're practicing apologetics by defending the faith from the vantage point, say, of biochemistry, astronomy, philosophy, history, whatever. All right. So I agree with Doug that there are inadequate degrees. Not that there aren't degrees, but they aren't really going to set you up for success, because getting a PhD, especially a PhD in apologetics, if you're trying to be an academic, is not the best idea. Now, I'm going to have a caveat here later on about why whatever you want to do with apologetics is fine as long as it's what you want to do. But PhD in apologetics, because if you get a PhD, you're going into academics. Well, a PhD in apologetics is not really going to set you up well for academia. It's also not going to set you up well for church. Okay, so this is the second point: ineffective ministry. Just generalists, you're just a generalist and a master of nothing, really, if you're trying to go into ministry. So I came to SCS again because I had my own personal desires to learn why I thought Christianity was true and to be able to defend it. And there are a lot of people who go to SCS to get an MA in apologetics and other degrees too, and that's a good reason, and there are good reasons to do that. But when people tell me they're going to go into ministry, like especially typical church ministry, like being a pastor of some sort, I tell them normally that you unless you have some specific thing you want to do, you're better off getting a degree that's going to prepare you for what's oftentimes called pulpit ministry or general traditional ministry, like Bible and theology and MDiv, learn Greek and Hebrew, learn hermeneutics, and you can incorporate apologetics into that as much as you want to. But straight apologetics and not Greek and Hebrew and hermeneutics and homiletics, it's not going to prepare you for church ministry. It's not going to prepare you for academics either, really. You want to become actually a professional scholar in something, again, history, philosophy, science, whatever. So the first problem that we both see in it is inadequate degrees. They don't really prepare you for these things. If you're going in academia or standard church ministry, it's ineffective ministry because it doesn't prepare you for it, doesn't train you for it. And insufficient opportunities is Doug's third point. And he says that most churches don't hire apologists. And I think I agree with him. I've been in church my whole life. I've worked for 4 churches. I've been in church beyond that. I've volunteered at churches. And I've never heard of anybody being hired as an apologist per se. That's not to say there aren't any. I know people who do apologetics in churches, but they do it probably from a youth pastor point of view or a associate pastor or something unique. And so there's just not a lot of opportunities specifically for apologetics. And again, this is a general comment that it can be broken by certain specific instances. So I understand that. So you may have a church, you may be in a position where you say, well, all I do for my church is apologetics or whatever. And that's great. That's fine. That's probably not the norm. I think I agree with Doug on that one. So church positions normally are going to be these typical positions where you might have an emphasis on something. So rather, Doug and I say normally you would study for that kind of position. If you want to be a head pastor, then learn Greek and Hebrew. If you want to be a youth pastor, still study the Bible, learn Greek and Hebrew, do what you're going to do in youth ministry, and so forth. Now, I will say that there are reasons for getting training in apologetics. And I don't think Doug would say these are bad ideas. I think he says the same thing in his video. So there are bad reasons for pursuing certain aspects of apologetics or for using it for certain reasons, like being a professor or being a pastor. But there are some good reasons to do it. The best reason is this: if you just want to do it, if you just wanted to study apologetics, then go to school, get a degree in that. But you need to be aware that if you're just studying apologetics per se, that there are certain kinds of jobs and positions that you're going to probably be lending yourself toward. And I think some of those most obvious ones are parachurch ministries, like Ratio Christi or other college organizations where you can be funded by people as a campus ministry or some kind of organization to do apologetics. And getting a degree in apologetics is good for that because in some cases you need to be a generalist. If you're talking to just a lot of people on campus as a Ratio Christi member, or if you do have an apologetics ministry for your church, you have to have some level of generality in your apologetic knowledge base, right? So there are reasons to do this. One, if you just want to teach your children, your family about apologetics, you want to take this to your Sunday school. If you want to maybe get a job in something like Ratio Christi or a parachurch ministry or a university setting, or you want to run a YouTube channel, Doug mentions this, you run a YouTube channel or some kind of a social ministry or speaker. If you just want to do that, then these are reasons to do this. Except, as Doug says, and I agree with him, if you're wanting to be very successful at YouTube and a speaker, you really need to have a certain niche. And Doug did that, as he says in his video, with the message behind the movie. He has a book on that. He did a great job with that. So we need a certain angle, niche, or some way of doing that, because as he says, the fields are saturated because it's very popular today. Nowadays, you can go to different schools and get MAs and PhDs, and I wouldn't recommend that, in apologetics. Okay. I would recommend getting, if you want to be an apologist in academia, like Doug says, do philosophy, do theology or whatever, history, science, whatever. So there are good reasons for doing it. You just want to do it. You want to be able to write about it, your own blog, your own social media, YouTube channel. You want to be in parachurch ministry. You want to bring this to your church in some capacity. You want to be involved in university ministry, or you just want to do it for whatever reason. That's a great reason to do it. Just be aware that if you get a PhD in it or a master's degree in it, you might not be qualified for certain aspects that want a specific niche in the area that you're applying for. But there are good reasons for doing it. And I think Doug thinks this too, that you should study apologetics as a Christian and as a rational thinker person, that we should be able to defend what we believe, and Doug says this as well. So how do you do that? How do you study apologetics? Well, you go on to YouTube channels and you follow people if you're not going to school. You find ministries. RTB is a great ministry. SES is great to look at. We have obviously academic programs at SES, but they're all also people affiliated with the school, our alumni and professors doing our own YouTube channels. As you can see, I'm doing mine right here. Here you go. Welcome. And if you are wanting to go to get formal training, then shameless plug, I think SES is one of the best schools, if not the best school in the world to train in apologetics, because we have a specific method. We are classical in our views that permeates our entire curriculum in terms of theology and Bible. We incorporate our classical philosophy and classical apologetics throughout the whole our entire body of knowledge in every degree is classical in nature, and it's interconnected, and it's systematic and intentionally so. So should you study Christian apologetics? Yes, you should. Should you make it a career? Maybe. And if you do want to make it a career, make sure you are smart about that and get the right degrees. So I think apologetics is interesting. I teach it at Apologia for homeschoolers. I teach apologetic type stuff at SES, and I do my own stuff here on YouTube and my own blog and speak sometimes. So let me know what you think. Leave a comment. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, please, so people can see this around YouTube more. And let me know what your thoughts are. And I appreciate it. Have a good day. See you next time.